I've been rather sick this past week, as I'm sure you can hear in my voice, and I had planned on doing a big, elaborate, exciting video today, and ultimately, upon beginning to film, just felt like utter crap and not up to memorizing lots of notes and relaying them on video. So I'm just going to do another story time. Today's story time is related to recovery, specifically addiction recovery, because I have co-occurring disorders, both mental illness and substance use disorder. So a lot of my recovery journey is a balancing act between recovering my mental health and recovering my stability with my sobriety. So historically, my sobriety has been depressing, to say the least. It's been full of tragedy and loss and grief from the beginning, because when I got sober, I immediately lost a loved one who died of cancer within my first, I'd say, 2 or 3 weeks being sober. And since then have continuously lost more and more people. So over the span of 4 years, 9 of my loved ones have died, which a lot of people have told me is not typical. Most people don't lose that many people when they get sober, especially not continuously back to back, where you're losing at least one loved one a year for your first several years. It started to feel like a bit of a cosmic joke, because there developed a pattern in which someone in my life always died right before my sober birthday. So whenever I'd be coming up on that milestone, whatever it may be, my first, second, or third sober birthday, someone always died. Coming up on my first sober birthday, my dog died 2 weeks before that day in my arms, which was heart-wrenching. And the next year, my friend Jake died in an accident. The year after that, my Aunt Kathy died from cancer. And all of these happened around the same time, like 10 or so days before my sober birthday. So coming up on my 4-year sober, I was nervous, thinking, who is it gonna be this year, right? It's gotta be someone. It's happened every year so far. Who's it gonna be? Well, it turns out that this was my lucky year, because not only did nobody die, I also played a hand in possibly saving someone's life. It was the day before my sober birthday, October 4th, 2023, and I had traveled out to the islands to go visit a friend. I used to live on an island and have since moved to the mainland, but I still go back from time to time to see people. And it is a huge journey for me as someone who doesn't drive, because I have to take 3 buses and then an Uber to get to the person, and then an Uber back to the bus line to take 3 more buses to get home. This is an entire day's journey, and I generally plan my whole day around knowing that I'll be gone, because it will be hours of getting there and back without even accounting for the time I'll be with my friend. So I headed out to the islands at like 10 a.m. and there was so much commotion that day that it pretty much doubled my day. When I got off of my second bus at the Park and Ride, I hadn't realized that there'd be an hour gap between then and the next bus. So already my day was extended by an hour. This was a factor in the timing of what would ultimately lead to helping a person stay sober that day. My bus going back home was delayed by construction, so it was late in picking me up at the station and resulted in me missing my connecting bus on the way home. Another factor in what would ultimately lead to helping someone stay sober. I was already an hour behind schedule because of the gap that I hadn't accounted for in the bus getting to the island. And now I was another hour behind schedule because of the delay, which led to missing my connecting bus. So I sat at this park and ride completely alone for an hour as the sun went down and it got colder, and just figured that I would eventually get on this bus, go home, and that would be my day. This had to be the end of my day, you know? Like, nothing more exciting could happen at this point in my day. Well, next thing you know, 2 buses showed up at the park and ride. One was the bus I had just taken that was coming from the island, and the other was the bus I'd been waiting for that was going back to the mainland. And wouldn't you know that someone who looked very familiar to me got off of the island bus and went to get in line to the mainland bus. Now this man, who we'll just call Hank, was familiar enough to me that I knew him from somewhere, but vague enough that I wasn't sure where, so I stayed aloof. I got behind him in the line, but I didn't address him. I followed him onto the bus and I went all the way to the back and sat by myself, and he sat kind of near me, but just far away that it wasn't, apparent that he was trying to get close to me. I sensed that he was pretty anxious, but from what I knew of this guy, he was pretty much always anxious. For most of the bus ride, the 2 of us were quiet and didn't interact. And in that time, I kept thinking to myself, where do I know you from? Where do I know this guy from? And then it clicked that I knew him from my meetings. I knew him from my 12-step meetings, and I hadn't seen him in a while. Well, around the time that it dawned on me that I knew who he was and that his name was Hank, he got the courage to get up and come closer to me. And he asked me, do you remember me? And I said, yeah, I do. I remember you from such and such meeting. And he was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I'm kind of in a bit of a problem right now. It turns out that Hank was struggling to stay sober, and he had a large can of malt liquor with him that he had just bought at the store. And apparently he had been debating whether to drink it or not, and wasn't sure if he should go through with it, wasn't sure if he should get rid of it, and so he had prayed. He had prayed right before getting off that first bus that God would send him a sign not to drink that night, and he took me being on the bus with him that night as his sign. He said that he wanted to get rid of the alcohol, but he didn't want to trigger me. And I was like, no, dude, you're fine. Just give it to me. I'll take care of it. And he was like, are you sure? Because I'd hate if you were to relapse too. And I was like, dude, I got you. Don't even worry about it. So he did give me the malt liquor and kind of calmed down a bit. And when I got off the bus, I went to the nearest dumpster and just threw it away without even thinking twice. Partly because it was my sober birthday the very next day, and mainly because I don't like alcohol to begin with, I didn't feel at all triggered by the malt liquor that Hank gave me, and I didn't feel tempted in the least to drink it. I also didn't really, understand how significant this moment was for this guy, because I was so concerned with getting the alcohol away from him that it didn't really occur to me how freaky, it was that all of these events led up to me happening to be in his path right after he prayed for an intervention. If I had gotten the bus schedule right that day, I wouldn't have been delayed by an hour. If I hadn't been delayed by an hour, I wouldn't have gotten on the bus that was late. If my bus hadn't been late, it wouldn't have missed the connection and I wouldn't have waited for an hour. If none of that had happened, who knows? Well, I'm fairly certain I know. But he asked for this favor from God in a moment, and boom, I was there. So to him, that is significant. And to me, I was just, concerned, right? I was concerned, but I didn't really actually make that big of a deal of it at the time. It wasn't until I got home and told my fiance what had happened, and he pointed out to me how those things don't just happen. They don't just happen, that I kind of got like chills, I guess, that I had been placed in his path right when he needed me, right when he needed a very, very, very specific person, a person who knew him, who was sober themselves, who wouldn't be tempted by alcohol and could get rid of it for him. All of these factors that I had, that, I still have, I'm still that guy. I guess it hit a little different when he pointed that out to me, that those freak incidents, they don't just happen. I struggle with my faith a lot, and I tend to be skeptical of a lot of things, and I don't tend to have faith in prayer. But if he prayed for something and it came true, and that's what guides him, then that's awesome, Like, I don't know that I was necessarily some sort of a servant of God that day. I don't know that I was necessarily put in that place by God, but if that's what he believes, then that's amazing. I think what I believe is that I got really lucky. I got really lucky in having a day where everything kind of went wrong, but I rolled with the punches, and in the end I got to help someone. I still don't really know what to make of it, because on the one hand, I'm very glad that I was there for Hank that day, but on the other hand, I don't think I'm responsible in any way for his sobriety, because ultimately, whether or not he gets and stays sober is up to him, I don't know that he didn't get more alcohol after I threw his away. I don't know if he stayed sober that night. I don't know if he relapsed after that. Like, who's to say? What I do know is that I see Hank all the time now. I see him at meetings fairly regularly, and we talk. We've never discussed what happened that day, but we touch base, and he's sober now. So I don't know if that actually did play a role in his sobriety as it is today. I don't know if that's what got him sober, and I'm certainly not responsible for that. If I played a part in that, that's awesome. But ultimately, I'm just glad that I keep seeing this guy around, that he's sober now, because that's more important than anything, right? Like, whatever came out of that night on the bus, whether he did ultimately relapse or not, he's sober now, and that's most important. So that's a bit of a story time for you about the time that I just happened to be in the path of a person who needed help and was available to help them. I just love that story because it's the first year of my sober birthday being positive, of instead of losing someone, I gained someone, and now I have this really cool guy in my life who we've both been touched by that event. So I'm really glad that I was there for him. I'm really glad that, I get to see him more. It's interesting how sobriety has unfolded for me, how it started out as a series of tragedies, and now it's starting to become pretty awesome. So that's all I have for you this week. Thank you so much for watching my video. I appreciate you. If you're interested in more of my videos, I put out new ones every Monday and Thursday. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Please comment if you have any other interesting experiences in sobriety that you'd like to share. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.